The purpose of this podcast is to review how to write goals and objectives in the field of recreation therapy. To start out, just to review what a goal is, it is a broad statement of intent. Now we want, as recreation therapists, we want our goals to promote well-being in our clients. And so as we are setting goals, we want to make sure that our goals fall into one or multiple of the following categories: intrinsic goals, authentic goals, approach goals, harmonious goals, flexible and appropriate goals, and activity goals. And these goals, we want our goals to fall into these sections because it's been shown that these types of goals promote well-being. And so if you take a little bit of time to review what each of these means, and be sure as you're writing your goals that your goals fall into those categories. Now there are different types of goals. There are long-term goals and short-term goals. And long-term goals and short-term goals vary from agency to agency. That kind of depends. It's usually an outpatient versus inpatient type setting, or each agency kind of has its own timeline. So a long-term in one agency may be 12 months, while a long-term in another agency, a long-term goal, would be 3 months. Or a short-term goal in one agency would be a week, whereas in another agency it might be a month. And so you really just have to feel that out with the agency that you're in, but just be aware that there are short-term and long-term goals. All goals should have the following attributes. They need to be clear. They need to capitalize on the strengths of the client and their environment. And we need to make sure that they are enhancing the client's leisure life, and that they are written for the client, not necessarily as what we're going to do as TRSs, but what the client's desired outcome is. And then we need to make sure that our goals are achievable. So an objective is a statement of intent in measurable terms. So our objectives, really, as our clients meet their objectives, they should be working towards meeting their goals. And so our objectives need to be SMART objectives, meaning they need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-framed. Another way of looking at goals is that they need to have 3 different components in them. They need to have a behavior or an action. They need to have a criterion or a standard, and there needs to be a condition on them as well. And so as you see, we have an example here. Client will verbally identify 5 cardiovascular exercises he would like to include in his exercise program within the first 10 days of attending exercise groups. And so as you look through this page, you can see that each of those criterion or each of those bullet points are met with this objective. And so we're going to have a little bit of a test later and work through a couple of examples. I just wanted to review briefly how goals and objectives fit together. There's 2 examples, and you can kind of look over them. Sometimes, and this kind of depends on agency to agency, our short-term goals may feed our long-term goals. So as our clients are meeting their short-term goals, it's helping them progress towards a long-term goal. And as they're meeting their objectives, that's helping them progress towards their short-term goal. Where in other agencies, sometimes long-term goals may have their own objectives, and short-term goals may also have their own objectives. And like I said, that kind of varies from agency to agency, and you'll feel that out as you go out and become a professional. So I wanted to work through a few examples of objectives that are that need a little bit of help. So our first example here is Jimmy will attend a RAP group to create a plan that includes leisure. In case you're wondering what RAP means, RAP is an acronym that means Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And so our objective is that Jimmy will attend these groups to create a plan that includes leisure. So our objective is not measurable. So what's missing from our objective that would make it measurable? Here's an example of the same objective that is measurable. Jimmy will complete the 5-week wrap group with at least 80% attendance. So there is one small component that's missing there. We didn't necessarily include that it needed to include leisure, and so we might add that even into our measurable objective. So as you can see here, our original objective was not measurable, and it didn't have a condition. The condition being 5 weeks or 80%, and yeah, that made it measurable. So let's go on to another example. Jimmy will identify leisure activities that he has access to in his community. Again, not measurable. What is missing? Jimmy will identify and record 10 empowering leisure activities that are accessible to him in his home community prior to discharge. Measurable. We can put numbers on it. We can see whether or not he's completed this, and it's not subjective, it's very objective. So what was missing? A criterion, or it needed to be specific, it needed to be measurable, and it needed to be time frame. So we included the specificity, the measurement, and the time frame. I hope this will help you with goals and objectives. Moving on, I wanted to do an overview of the treatment outline and intervention outlines, because as you're working through the semester in 472, there's a few assignments that you're going to be working through, and so I wanted to kind of overview them and help you see the big picture before you start doing this assignment. So each week you will turn in a treatment outline. I'm going to use my mouse here. So you'll have treatment outline number 1, number 2, all the way 1 through 10. Each week you should have new data based on your one client that you're assessing. So if you're working with multiple clients in your offsite or in your volunteer hours, that is great. You do need to pick one client to focus on and to write these goals and objectives for. So each week you'll have new assessment data. For the first couple of weeks, you will be writing and refining goals and objectives. These will not change a lot because you're working with this client through your 10 sessions to help them try and achieve these goals. So these goals and objectives will not change much from week to week. You will be refining them as you get feedback from your instructor. These modalities here correlate with the intervention outline that you'll be completing. And so the equipment and materials and the space requirements also correlate with your modalities. This section of the assignment will not be filled out until you actually meet with your client and implement these modalities here. So you might be a little bit confused, but hang with me because you'll see the big picture here in just a second. So this is what your intervention outline looks like. And when I say intervention outline, I mean modality. You have 2 modalities each week, at least, that you need to work out and include in your treatment outlines. This is how you tell us what your modality is. So these goals and objectives correlate with your treatment goals and objectives here. This goal is the goal of the intervention. So each intervention may have a different goal. As you can see, there's equipment and materials needed. Fits on both sheets here. Equipment and materials needed. Intervention. This is where you describe what you will be doing for an intervention, as if you were describing it to your client or to another TRS that was going to implement this, this intervention. Okay? Be sure to include your sources for how your intervention is research-based. Here you're going to include actual questions. So you've studied and worked with the content and process format before. Be sure as you're writing your process side that you're including your front-loading questions and your processing questions. So we've gone over these two documents. How do they all fit together? Here we go. This is the big picture. So 2 weeks prior to your intervention being used with your clients at your volunteer site, you will include, or you will turn in a treatment outline each week up to the implementation section. So remember this first page. Also, each week you will include 2 intervention outlines that will correlate with your treatment outline. 2 weeks later, you will be implementing this. Once you get feedback from your instructor that things are going well, you'll be implementing it with your client. After you implement it from your client, you take your original treatment outline that's already filled out for the first page, fill out the second page, and turn it in again. And that will include charting and debrief questions that you've used. There's the references for this presentation. As you continue on, there are examples attached to the assignment for you to look at and see what you're expected to fill out and what information you're expected to include.